Hello everyone. Welcome to my Form 3 religion class at St. Anselm's Abbey School. This class is the first year in which our students directly study the teachings of the Catholic Church, but with a special emphasis on the intellectual tradition that goes with those teachings. In this video, I will go over my goals for this class, as well as the basic procedures by which we will execute it. Now, my first goal for this class, as is true for all of my classes, is to read well. This is a reading class, and I want my students to learn to read at a very high level. I don't mean some passive skill by which we can scan over the words of a page and recognize what all the words mean. When I say I want my students to read well, I mean that they must remember what they read, they must understand the things that the author is trying to communicate, and they must be able to explain those things. And if you can't remember and understand and explain what you read, then you can't really read. Not at the level we want you to be able to read here. Now, in middle school, at our program, reading is about the narrative of the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's basically story time, and we're trying to get our students to have a working familiarity with the contents of the Bible. But now, in high school, things are a little different. We're not going to be reading narratives and trying to derive lessons from them. Instead, we're going to be reading argument. And so a big component of reading this year will be learning to parse argument. How do we follow along with an argument? What sorts of things do we expect? How do we critique them? How do we defend them? What's the right way to react to an argument? That'll be a new kind of reading for a lot of my students. And it's part of what makes the class a little difficult. Our goal when we read these arguments or defenses or critiques of things is not to create a catalog of historical curiosities. When we read St. Anselm, whether that's Proslogion in the fall or Cur Deus Homo in the spring, it's not just so that we know what someone thought 900 years ago. The power of the written word is that we can enter into a conversation with people who lived centuries ago or more. Our goal is to share with these authors the same intellectual discovery that they made or that they were thinking through when they wrote the book. We can do this with any book. This is why it's so important to know how to read. We can transcend space and time to understand and really, in a sense, to have a conversation with them about an important idea. That's what we will be doing this year. Reading so that we can have the same mind as people who lived before us. Now, a big part of that is going to be learning to ask questions well. There are bad questions. In fact, bad questions are cheap and easy to find. Good questions are much more difficult. And the problem with bad answers is, or bad questions rather, is that they are a huge obstacle to arriving at a real understanding of things. A bad question almost inevitably leads to a bad answer. There's no guarantee that a good question or a well-asked question will get you to a good answer, but it's certainly where we need to start. It's certainly the thing we need to focus on. We'll spend a lot of time in this class not jumping ahead to some magic answer that we're supposed to memorize and then regurgitate for some strange reason, but rather trying to understand the question and what are all the problems involved in this question? Why are we asking it in the first place? What are we hoping to find? It's only by doing that that we can get to an answer that will make sense as something other than a thing to be memorized. The more time you spend on the question, the easier it is to understand the answer and the more it will mean to you. And this is an important lesson that goes far beyond this class or really any class. This is a universal skill. This is ultimately a matter of how will we make our way in this world? How will we learn to listen to others? How will we try to seek understanding? How will we try to understand ourselves? By putting an emphasis on the question or the problem and learning to ask good questions, the right kind of questions. And we'll do a lot of that this year. Now, our third goal for this class is theological sophistication. We're pretty upfront in our middle school program about steering away from that. It's basically story time in middle school. And we do inevitably end up talking about God and humanity and the meaning of life, but we keep things at arm's length and we keep things vague as best we can. We never really tackle the big questions head on. Well, now is the time to do that. That's what this 9th grade class is for. Once you're in high school, it's time to get serious. Students are now old enough to start thinking like adults and to stop thinking like children. And that means we can ask all those questions, really that students couldn't ask very well before, and they'll learn to ask them well now, and to appreciate the answers given, at least a little bit. So no more putting things off until next year. That time is now to go over those things. A big part of that, moving beyond childish thinking, means that a lot of ideas or notions that you've all accumulated through your childhood about Christianity and about religion and about God and the Catholic Church, it is false. It's not very good thinking. And a big part of learning to think seriously about things is getting rid of those notions. So this class can be a little bewildering and disorienting at times as we go about sort of myth busting in a variety of ways and trying to get you to take the first steps toward thinking deeply about things that matter. I'll never waste your time as a student summarizing for you what St. Anselm thinks about something, or what St. Augustine thinks about something, or what St. Thomas thinks. You're going to just read what they think, and then you're going to explain to me what they think. And I'm going to help you do that. And that is our goal for this class. Now, I can't easily summarize the entire course in one question, quite like I can in middle school. For those of you that took my 7th grade class, you know that everything we read is ultimately to answer a single question: what makes a good king of Israel? We can't quite do that in this class. However, if there is one question that best captures what we are doing, a theme that runs through the year, and indeed a final exam essay question, if not the only one, is this on the screen. All year, we will either directly or indirectly be grappling with: what does fides quaerens intellectum mean? Now, if you're new to the Abbey School and haven't taken any Latin yet, don't worry. This isn't memorize lots of Latin for no reason. In fact, that Latin's quite simple. I expect all of our returning 9th graders to be able to parse that out. It simply says faith-seeking understanding. What does it mean for faith to seek understanding? What is the relationship between faith and understanding? What do all those words mean? And not just the words, but the realities behind them. That's what we ultimately care about. This is a very important question in the Catholic tradition, one of our most important and probably one of our most distinctive features. And so we will spend a lot of time on this. Now, let's bring things back down to earth a little bit. How will we actually run this class? We don't use a religion textbook, really at any level in our high school, because most religion textbooks are not terribly helpful. Our textbook is a compilation of primary sources that I have pulled together through the years and that I will always provide to you. You do not need a book. I will provide links to readings. They will usually be between 1 and 4 pages in a Google Doc, I think. Our first reading is a little bit longer than that, and I think you'll see why. It's about 5, but it's a little different than what we'll read throughout the year. The following week, it's exactly 2 pages. And that's going to be roughly our target. If I were to hand it out to you in class as a photocopy, my goal is always for it to print out on a single sheet of paper, front and back. That means the readings are quite short. They are, however, quite difficult. You'll need to use your time. The fact that you can scan the page in 5 or 10 minutes, the whole reading in 5 or 10 minutes, doesn't mean you should read for 5 or 10 minutes and then stop. You're going to need to spend time with these readings, and you're going to need to revisit them as we go through the week. Your goal is to understand them and to explain them. You're not going to get it all at once and then move on. It's the kind of thing that you'll still get something out of 1 week later, 1 month later, at the end of the year when you're studying for the final, 30 years later when you're trying to teach the class. There's a reason we still read these things 1,000 years later or 2,000 years later. There's a lot there. So those are the readings, and I'll always give them to you online. You're going to be taking a lot of notes in this class, and you need to think about your notebook as a little bit more than some silly spiral pad or legal pad that you're going to keep at home or bring with you to school if we ever get back in school. You're going to need to take notes when you're reading. Not just what we do in class, but first and foremost, you need to write things down while you are reading. Whether that's outlining it, trying to explain it to yourself as you're going through it, things that strike you as surprising or important, or where you get stuck. You have to note where you get stuck so that you can ask me about it, so that you know what to talk about in class. Being stuck is going to happen. So take note of that and try to press through it. If you don't try to press through these readings and get something out of them, then the time that we spend together in class will not be as helpful. You're also going to have online assignments, homework assignments, although it doesn't really make sense to call it homework these days, I think. And these will be short assignments that go with the reading. They will be my way of directing you to look at the parts of the text that matter, or the ideas of the text that matter. Not necessarily everything, but posts, signposts, mile markers along the way that you should be able to take note of. So you should think of these homework assignments as part of your notes, not something to turn in and forget about, but something that will help you study when you're writing a paper or when you're taking a test or writing your final exam essays. You are also going to need to take a lot of class notes. You're going to have more video options than most of my students through the years, but the time that we spend together live, whether that's in Zoom or in person or whatever we're going to end up using at different times throughout the year, whatever format it is, when we're together, you're going to need to take good notes. And my students never take very good notes. Hopefully, at the very least, you know to write down the things that I emphasize and repeat. But one of the difficulties of this class is that I will be asking questions and getting you as a group of students to think through the answer. You will be assembling the answer together through your trials and through your errors. And that means that you really need to listen to what your classmates say. You need to write down the answers that they give. And if I say the answer is wrong and then explain why their answer was wrong, you should write that down too. And when I identify an answer as correct, you need to write that down as well. So there's going to be a lot to write down at first. You will eventually get the hang of it, but you should be able to generate a page or two of notes every day. And then finally, you're going to be writing papers, short ones, just 1 to 2 pages. I don't know exactly how many just yet. They are going to replace quizzes, either completely or for the most part this year. But there is material that's not quite as suitable for reaction papers. These papers are also the kind of thing that will help you in the future when you are studying. You should think of them as rough drafts for future exam questions. So those are going to be the kinds of things you're writing and keeping for yourself. The class is basically a modified Oxford tutorial, or you might say more simply a supervised independent work. This isn't really an Oxford tutorial. You're not college students. I'm not even sure Oxford students are up for the ideal Oxford tutorial anymore. But fundamentally, as we're going to look at in our first reading, learning is an activity of your mind. You do it, not me. I can't make you learn anything. I can't learn for you any more than I can choose for you. So I'm going to give you readings, and you're going to try to understand them. And I'm going to help you ask the right questions to do that. And you're going to learn to give good answers. And then you're going to explain it to me. The class is really very simple. You read things, you explain them to me. I help you do that. The things that you read are hard. The ideas that you're trying to grapple with are most likely going to be new to you. They're going to be very different than the kinds of things that you've studied before. But you can do it. My students have done it for many, many years, and I will always be here to help you. Everything we do during the week is just trying to help you do your own learning. Usually that will culminate in the critical reaction paper that I mentioned on the previous slide. 1 to 2 pages, critiquing or critically responding to something that we've read, I'll provide prompts. We'll work on them during the week, but these are somewhat open-ended. I want you to have serious, interesting, thoughtful things to say about these works. We'll have tests, probably 2 per semester, although the schedule might change as we have to respond differently to the shutdown. You will have a midterm and you will have a final exam, and the tests will be essay only. We may at some point in the future have some quizzes. Some of the material is a little bit better for quizzing than for papers, but that's something we can worry about down the road. This is the basic shape of the class. This is what you're going to be doing. You read, you struggle to understand, I help you do it, you explain it to me, we move on. And as we go through the year, we're actually assembling one coherent set of ideas. They all fit together. They're not unrelated to each other. And partially your goal is to see what that is as we go through the year. Now, this is the last slide, and this is the last and most important thing. It's also our first reading. This is true for every class that you take. This is true for school in general, for all learning, but it's especially true for the way I teach this class. How much you learn and how much fun you have doing it are entirely up to you as a student. I can't make you learn it, and I can't make you have fun doing it. If you want to understand things, if you want to free your mind and to get better and to excel, you can do it. And I think you'll probably have fun doing it. But if you're insistent that this be a miserable experience, I promise you that it will be. I don't think you should make that choice. If I could choose for you, I think the choice is quite clear. But this requires from you quite a bit of commitment. I say this every year to my students, but now with distance learning, it's even more true. And this is what I like about distance learning. I don't think distance learning makes learning any harder at all. The only thing distance learning has done is strip away everyone's illusions about what learning really is. This little thing written on the screen here has always been true. It's always been the case. It was just easier for you to deceive yourselves or your parents that you were learning when you were in a classroom. But sitting in a classroom and having words bounce around you, that isn't learning. And indeed, that is what our first reading this year is going to be about. Well, that's enough for our introduction. If you have any questions about how this class is going to work or what we're going to talk about this year, you know how to get a hold of me. This video is going to be our first assignment together of the year, and then we're going to jump right in with Plato's Allegory of the Cave. I look forward to seeing you all in class. Good luck. God bless.